and welcome to the Binge Thinker episode 49. My name is Jameeljrehman. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here as always. This week's eps is gonna be a shorter one, binges. Why? Because I am not well. I have I've had a bit of TMI straight off the bat in the first couple of minutes. I've got pretty bad gastro or diarrhea or something. I'm recording this on the Anzac Day long weekend. Officially not a long weekend for most Australians, but unofficially a long weekend because whenever you put a public holiday on a Tuesday in Australia, you may as well just write off the Monday because nobody's fucking coming in unless they have to, right? Unless you're at an annual leave or if you can't find a way to flog off your job, it's a long weekend. So I think I have an allergy or my stomach doesn't agree with one of my protein powders anymore or my creatine, I'm not too sure. But it's been causing me some stomach troubles. It started on Thursday. Thursday night I had a big meal which did not help and I've been basically blast sharting, for the lack of a better term, since then. It is now Monday, before when this comes out live. So, yeah, for the last 4, almost 5 days now, I have not been digesting and eating well. I've had to basically write off this weekend. I've been at home doing sweet fuck all, resting up, trying to get my gut biome back into shape. Spent a lot of time on the toilet. My butthole is red raw, to the point where there is a little bit of blood in my stool, and I can't tell if that's from excess wiping or if things are getting worse. Hopefully you enjoy that whilst you are enjoying a little fine meal or a snack and want to have that fantastic visual burnt into your internal memories. So yeah, I'm going to keep this one more light-hearted than those last 2 minutes. I want to focus on one particular topic that I think is quite interesting, a great new learning that I've got as part of the solo entrepreneurial journey. And it's also just more of it's a mix of systems and the journey itself. I'm going to talk about economics for a little bit on this ep. More particularly, there's this great this great video that I found from a guy called Ray Dalio on YouTube. And I did a bit of digging into him, and he's a very interesting cat. And he's released a series of content on YouTube that is fantastic for not just entrepreneurs, but really just around understanding the socio-economic climate at the moment, the changing of power between the US and China economically, and even understanding more broadly how the economics machine works, which is actually literally one of his titles in one of his videos. And the reason why I think this is so important is because I've talked about systems, and particularly a couple episodes ago about not having the things that are important in our lives actually being taught to us, early on. I just found like that this is one of these videos and one of these lessons that is extremely important for us to understand, particularly in the current economic climate where we know we're facing into an economic recession, maybe a depression, even though, the official central banks, blah, 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 will not officially say it's in one because they're trying to do everything they can do to pull the economy out of the gutter using printing money and now deflationary tactics and all that sort of stuff. It's important to take control of your life through understanding how these systems and these processes works and then leveraging them to your advantage. And the videos that Ray has released, one of them called Principles for the Changing World Order, and then how the economic machine works are really critical pieces of self-education about economics and the changing face of economic power. I really do believe this. In fact, I think I'll be using it as a talking piece in the sales course when I release it as part of the Economics 101 module that I'll be putting in there. Because as part of the sales course, there is a bit of economic theory and understanding that I think is important to have. You're never going to use it every single day when you're in sales, but you are going to need to understand how buying cycles work, how the macroeconomic cycles affect, the ability for organizations to consume, how to procure, when they procure more and less, how you can target your messaging to your customer understanding their economic plight or the situation that they're in. And without having that understanding of how the machine works, how are you going to talk about it without sounding like a fucking idiot or being caught out because you really don't know enough? So, understanding how economics works, understanding how you can leverage the machine in your favor, I think is critical and should be taught in schools, and it's not. We know that. It's so dumb that um, we we are so victim and so subject to the economy. Pardon me. That was me sipping on electrolytes, hydrolyte. I've smashed an entire tub of them, tube, over the last 24 hours, and probably will be drinking them now until the end of time, I believe. That's what the doctor told me. That's not true. I haven't seen a doctor yet, which I should. Not seeing a doctor, I can't tell. Here's a side note. Not seeing a doctor for entering the fourth or fifth day with this now. I can't tell if it's laziness or male stubbornness. Because, men don't like going to the doctor. And it's not that I don't like going to the doctor. I'm not afraid of them. But it's like two things. It's like, I don't want to have to wait and a doctor's going to tell me, yeah, just get some Imodium, which they do. And then two, it's like I've had this, I can write it out. I think only because it's getting to an extended point of of being on the fourth or fifth day, and it's not like it hasn't gotten better. It's gotten better, so it's slowly improving. But I'm just not out of the woods yet. I've barely left the house. I feel like a recluse, but it's been good for me. Anyway, we got distracted. Nice classic tangent here at the Binge Thinker. So what are we talking about? Oh yes, economics not taught to us, huge factor in deciding our material world, how material wealth can elude us or can come to us without understanding the systems that bring money in, how money operates. Money is a resource, not an outcome, okay? There are ways that money moves and works, and it operates in ways beyond our comprehension and operates in silence often. There's a great line that I got from Ian Dunlap, the master investor on Instagram, great resource for financial education, that he said, wealth moves in silence. And I agree with that 100%. And why does wealth move in silence? Because once you've figured out how money works, and the big secret of money, it eludes so much of us, right? You don't want to keep that. You want to keep that to yourself. And as you work harder and as you climb the ranks and as you get that smaller circle of of people that you want to spend your time and your energy and your money with, because you get the best return on that investment with your energy and the people you can trust, it's like you become less privy to helping everyone and serving everyone around you because you realize how many people are out there just to take. And you become, pardon me, there we go. Minor technical issue here. The Binge Thinker HQ, all solved now. Yeah, as you spend your time and your resources on people, you start to think about, more often, what is in this for me? So, and when you also get richer, I think once you get to a place of financial security as opposed to being rich, integrating that knowledge that you are wealthy, you are secure, you are safe, you don't have to flash it around as much. I don't think you don't really you don't feel the need to wear fucking Chanel everything or Gucci everything and have the chains and the fucking grills, and that's more like black culture and stuff. And that's what happens is when you get rich, you want to flash it because you're like, woo, check this out. But then after a while, the novelty of being wealthy kind of wears off. And if you don't mature past that, then you're just spending that money that you've just received on frivolous, dumb things like chains and fucking diamonds and jewelry and whatnot. It is what it is. And so I understand it. But once you get to a certain point, you speak less and it means more because you understand value. Your time is valuable. The people you spend your time, energy, money becomes increasingly valuable because you're a valuable person. And yeah, that's why, sometimes you have to treat yourself like a king to be treated like a king. So by, not having that sort of showiness, that sort of insecurity, and moving into that sort of more stoic, more developed individual, that's when you become wealthy. I mean, if you look at someone like Jay-Z, who's gone from a gangster, who probably did have the chains and the fucking cars and all that stuff. Now he's in suits, he's in nicely tailored clothes. He's more bespoke, he's more tailored, he's toned down a little bit. Yeah, you don't need to show off the money because that probably is more integrated into you as a being. And you go, and that guy, he's wearing something simple, but it's powerful. Or maybe they're wearing brands that if you're in the inner circle, you'll understand. Because, everyone can get Gucci, everyone can get Prada. They've got retail stores. But as the rich get richer, particularly with the Chinese middle class, from what I've understood, and that Chinese wealth class that sort of evolved, and you see those super rich, crazy rich Asians that hang around, they don't really go for the Gucci and the Prada anymore. They go for the real bespoke Italian stuff, like you need to know, the upper echelon shit, right? The stuff that exists beyond the common man. And that's what they get themselves into more. And even if you even look at like wealthy people, like look at Bill Gates, look at fucking Bezos, look at Elon, look at all these fucking rich motherfuckers, even Mark Zuckerberg, the Zuck. They wear capsule clothing. They wear simple stuff. Don't have to make too many decisions about what they make. They're more focused on creating wealth instead of showing it off. So yeah, understanding that wealth doesn't need to scream, doesn't need to be out there, because also, like, when it comes to generating wealth, if it was that easy, everyone would do it, but there's not. There's a 1% for a reason. It accumulates and it works its way up because they build systems for streams of income to generate and pull at the top. Can you hate the player in the game? Yeah, you're going to hate the player, you're going to hate the game. Or you can leverage it to your advantage. And that is what we're trying to do for you here today, bingers. So, with that tangent well and truly through, let's go back to Ray Dalio and understanding how the economic machine works. So a little bit about Ray first, actually. So a little bit about Ray first. So Ray Dalio, did some research on him. Ray Dalio, Italian background, American investor. He came from like a sort of middle class home, did all right. Dad was a jazz musician, mum was just a homemaker. Started investing at the age of 12 years old after befriending a Wall Street expert, or some fat cat from Wall Street, while he was caddying for him as a day job, as a part-time day job, and he was 12 years old. That's pretty cool. It's funny how you can just get a job caddying at 12 years old. Also makes you realize that, 12-year-old, you couldn't get a 12-year-old today to be a golf caddy. I think there's a certain level of maturity that comes from having that level of independence when you aren't like tethered to an iPhone or an iPad, right? If I think about the maturity, it seems like 12-year-olds back in the day were much closer to being adults than the 12-year-olds of today. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I can't tell. Because in some ways you're like, oh, kids should stay kids for as long as they can to maintain, their childhood for as long as possible. But when you had a lifespan of about 45 to 50 a couple of centuries ago, wasting a 20% of your life just being like a blah, 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 no fucking chance. I mean, you think about child labor laws and you think about, what kids were in the mines at like 12, 13, 14 and, kids would help around the house at that time. I kind of go, it's a good thing. You're going to build practical skills for the future and integrate those habits earlier on as opposed to just being some fucking late blooming kid that doesn't leave the house until 30, which happens to a lot of people nowadays. So, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, but again, another fantastic tangent. So, Ray starts investing, starts early, gets an interest in investing thanks to making friends with people that know how to make money, goes to college, studies finance. Now, in his college years, interestingly enough, he starts transcendental meditating. I almost fucked that word up. transcendental meditation, popularized by people like David Lynch. It's just a form of meditation that focuses on a singular mantra that you repeat to yourself over and over again. So, similar to what meditation is when you focus on just the breath. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about that interest, that focus, so metacommunication, and then interoception. So the interoception is that focus in the breath, focus in the internal state. But instead of focusing on that the breath, again, it's that singular mantra that you are not allowed to tell other people. You tell yourself that over and over again. That's one of the secrets about TM, as it's called, is that you have a mantra, it's yours, and you can't tell anyone. It's like the birthday wish secret, you know? And that seems pretty interesting for a finance guy to be meditating. Particularly, it would have been like the early 70s, very early 70s, very late 60s, probably about 69, 70. And I mean, it's the key part of the hippie era. So, by the way, Ray's like 76 now, so he was like, yeah, 20 around the 69, 70. So, it's funny to think about a finance guy meditating. Right? I think about a white collar dude meditating back in those days. I mean, I don't know if the esoterra of the time and the hippie world sort of took him. I'm sure it did, like it took everyone, and probably blasted through his relatively conservative household. Also, his dad was a jazz musician, so I'm sure if he was a jazz musician, having a few jazz cigarettes, um, probably would be more exposed to a more liberal experience than maybe some of his more stuffed shirt and conservative upbringing families around him. What it does remind me, though, of is this is a very niche topic. You might have mentioned, you might have seen Mad Men back in the day. It reminds me of Bert Cooper, I think his last name was. He was one of the owners of Sterling Cooper, the ad agency that Don Draper was in. And um, yeah, Bert Cooper was an older man. He probably was in his 60s, but he was into art and he was into the art of Zen. And he was one of these creatives that sat at the top of a powerful advertising agency. And there seems to be this ongoing thread of people that understand the power of the mind, the power of Zen, Eastern spirituality, and integrate that into business for powerful results. So people like Bert Cooper, I'm reminded of someone like Todd Sampson. Steve Jobs was a meditator, took LSD in his teens. He had something called his reality distortion field, where he felt like he could manifest and change reality just with the power of his own thoughts, which is actually quite true. But when you combine that into the powerful organization, the corporation that is Apple, it is this kind of contrarian thinking to what we understand is the norm for business. And by adding these drops of humanity and tranquility and integration of Eastern philosophy into Western productivity, it seems to have some pretty powerful results. And that's something that I think about and sort of resonates with me often, and is almost a pseudo blueprint for something that I'd love to model my own life and my own business around in the future. And that's why I think I took to Ray when I figured out and understood that he is that kind of guy, that he is he might have been this fucking multi-billionaire, which we'll talk about, but then also, still understands that he's a human, part of humanity, has this compulsive need to share his principles on life and investing in business for other people's benefit and doesn't keep it to itself. I think when we think about these people that are mega wealthy and work on these baseless, dehumanized corporations such as a hedge fund or anything that has to do with finance, there's a degree of soullessness to it. And it's funny, it's just nice to see these drips of examples exist in the ecosystem. So anyway, with Ray, becomes an investor, starts a company called Bridgewater. The original version of Bridgewater doesn't work, but he keeps the name, and eventually he starts it again shortly after. He works at a couple of funds. He punches one of his old managers in the face because he's being a piece of shit. Great. Leaves his company, starts Bridgewater version 2. Now, Bridgewater, over time, in the 80s, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, actually becomes the largest hedge fund in the world. And the reason why that is that Ray innovates many of the common investment practices and finance practices that are now common practice in modern finance and investing over that 20-year span. Things that I cannot be bothered telling you about because I don't understand them, so why the fuck would I tell you? But where he really comes into his own is during the 2008 global financial crisis, where his investment fund, Bridgewater, largely dodges the majority of the GFC because Ray senses the cycles, the macroeconomic cycles that occur. He sees the issues, similar to the Big Short, where he understands that the markets are failing and this is going to be a big crash coming. So he hedges his bets against what the Fed and the central banks have to do to offset the crash that's happening or about to happen. So he warns people. He goes, "Hey guys, these debts are getting bad. There's a lot of risk that's coming up. We need to do something about this." Everyone ignores him. Where he goes, "You know what? Fuck this. I'm going to bet big on the fact that there's going to be a crash. I'm going to invest more into money, into currency, as opposed to assets, because I believe that the Fed is going to have to print more money to bail out and provide support to all these organizations and these corporations that are going to go bust as a result of the GFC." Lo and behold, it works. And in the 2008 financial year, he provides a return of average around 10% versus markets that were going down up to negative 23%. For example, the S&P 500. So some big numbers while everyone was crashing, while everyone zigged, he zagged, and it paid off in his favor. And then from there, the organization keeps growing. He keeps making his money. He ages well. He starts a family. But what he starts doing is starting to put out his principles on success, life, business out in books. And they're all based on principles. Another big thing that we focus here at the Binge Think is about principled thinking, the basics, doing them over and over again and understanding the fundamentals and compounding those fundamentals over time for your great success. So he releases a couple of books, and I haven't read the books because I can't be fucked. But he releases 2 great videos. One that we've already talked about them, Principles for the Changing World Order and How the Economic Machine Works. And I came across Ray when he released his book and did a bit of a press tour, Principles for the Changing World Order, because he was explaining in detail how great nations rise and fall. I think that's the tag of that book. And basically, in this book and in a supporting animation video that he put on YouTube, he explains the changing economic powers between the US and China and how that's happening and how we've seen examples of that in previous empires, such as the decline of the Dutch Empire and the English and British empires over the last 500 or so years. And he explains, using those examples and then relative examples of the US today, about how that's happening now and what we can do to understand these major changes. And so what he explains is this changing of economic power is the big cycle, right? This is something that happens every couple of hundred years as we see the changing of the literal world order. Who's in charge? Who's got the primary currency? Who is the most valuable? So we are privileged, not privileged, who knows, to see this at work in our lifetimes. Usually, if you were a generation or 2 ago, you wouldn't have really seen it that much. Maybe you would have seen, 2 or 3 generations ago, the decline of the British Empire, which generally happened around World War I and II over the last, the first half of the first 20th century. 20th? Yeah. But you know, very likely wouldn't have had an understanding of economics back then. But it's been interesting to see this dramatic rise and fall of the US economy largely within a century. At least the Brits probably had about 200 good years, 300 good years. Same with the Dutch. I mean, the Dutch took us over a significant part of the world, I wouldn't say developed world at the time. South Africa, the West Indies, parts of the US. Um, they had a pretty strong hold in a lot of major places. Indonesia, Southeast Asia, um, India. So, yeah, lots of influence. And then the British, Canada, Australia. Again, they probably turfed out the Dutch from the West Indies, a lot of Africa. Yeah, plenty of colonies. Pakistan, India. Just look at the International Cricket Board. That's basically most of the colonies that give a shit about cricket, and that's the majority of them that matter anyway. So, using those examples of the Dutch and English empires, he explains that most of these powers rise and falls through the changing of power through great conflict. So the Dutch transferred to the English after there was many Dutch-Anglo wars in, I don't know, 1500s. And then what happens is there is prosperity as post these big wartime eras, again, World War I and World War II, used for the American example. A period of prolonged prosperity and peace where there is sovereignty in the powerful nation. There's this monoculture of success and education and growth, and people are proud to be part of the nation. And then the empire expands and expands aggressively. Now, the Dutch and the English expanded their empire through colonization. The US doesn't expand the US expands its empire through proxy because it doesn't really take over a lot of countries, but it has a lot of presence in other nations under the premise of security and economic integration. You think of places like the Philippines, for example, who have a shitload of military bases, particularly as they were there to fight Japan in the World War II, and they never really left. There are naval bases basically all over the planet where America has presence and they have to pay and maintain that. And then they've mostly won their power through proxy and subterfuge. For example, probably undoing the Venezuelan government, undoing most of the Middle East, maintaining wartime issues between Israel and Palestine, blah, 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 right? I don't want to get too tinfoil hat. So as we see the economic expansion and we see the empire grow in its power, then the fall of the empire comes through the increased cost to maintain the breadth of that empire. Right? If you've got so much presence out there, you're spending so much money, you've got bases to maintain, you've got a lot of fat cats running around taking money. Again, you've got to build more services up. The country costs more and more to run. And generally what happens is you would require tribute or investments from these colonies to bring funds and money back into the empire to fund it. Well, how do things start collapsing? When things get too big to maintain and you have to shrink for a variety of reasons. Could it be war? Could it be the economy is tanking for some reason? Is it you've gotten a little bit too lazy and a little bit too arrogant and going, we're number one, when you're not number one for the longest time and shit starts to fall apart because your reputation is tarnished on global eyes because you've fucked up so many wars and gone to Iraq and spent trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and done nothing for it. Shit happens to you, right? And that happened to the British and it happened to the Dutch as well. So it explains in great detail, using those examples, how they recede and then what we will see in the next cycle of economic growth, which will very likely be China. Despite all of everyone's talking about, are they that developed? Are they that humane? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, we've all got our fucking crosses to bear economically and socially. America's got Guantanamo Bay. The Dutch and the English, oh, we don't even talk about what they used to do to the locals and the natives, particularly if you want to hear about Aboriginal history. Jesus fucking Christ. So it explains that in great detail, and it explains also that's the macro cycle, and then it also explains the smaller short-term cycles that exist in our economy. And he puts it into this fantastic visualization that he puts on the cover of the book, which I think is extremely important for us to know, because um, let me recontextualize this. So he talks about the big debt cycles, or the macro cycle of the changing economic powers, in the first video, which is Principles for the Changing World Order. And then in the second video that I watched, which was How the Economic Machine Works, he explains the shorter term debt cycles and how that operates on a smaller time frame, but is pretty cyclical in nature, which is what we're in right now. We are in a recession, potentially a depression, after years of economic growth and output through the pandemic, and a pretty good economic balance for years before that, thanks to low interest rates and just general peace and general prosperity through the advancements of things like technology, etc. So, understanding these economic fundamentals, such as the short term debt cycle, the long term debt cycle, and the basis of productivity growth, he explains how the cycles work, how the machine works from debt to credit, to how the Fed and the central banks can reprieve and sort of tinker with the economy by printing money, by increasing interest rates, all these things you hear about in the news, but you're never quite really sure how they work. He has a great, simplified, generalized principle for how this works in an educative and informative video, which I think is really, really good. Because the problem is, like we talked before, these systems, these processes, they affect us, but they're not taught to us. And they're not taught to us at a level that the layman can comprehend and understand. And financially, I'm still a bit of a layman. I've only been really getting into understanding finance and wealth and how that all works in the last 18 months to 2 years. And this is a lifelong skill, right? So, on the macro of understanding where I am in my own financial viability and freedom, and I'm still in the very, very early phases. Because if you know anything about investing, investing shouldn't be about day trading and be these short term gains. The most successful people have been trading on a long time scale. Your Warren Buffetts, etc. They talk about long term investing and having 20 to 30 years in this game of investing. But the problem is, the average person doesn't have enough discipline or have enough clarity or vision of what these investments looks like, and they get too emotional about how their money is invested and expect a return so quickly that they don't have the tenacity and the discipline to win in the long term. And that applies to most people in most pursuits, realistically. So if you think about something like diet and exercise, people think you just go on a crash diet, you're fine, and you go back to eating your same shit. Oh no, what happened? I've gained my weight again. What the fuck's going on? Because you just thought about the short term and you did not think about the long term in the way that you've gone about your life. Right? Like we just said, money is a resource, not an outcome. Food is calories. Calories is the resource, is the number. If you learn how to understand that number and how to maintain it long term and how to manipulate it to your advantage, that's how you get things like having a great body, good health, etc. Same with money. Money is the macro, the commodity, is the resource that you need to understand how to manage to your own benefit, and that will give you long term growth, returns, support, success if you understand it without the emotional, how would you put this? Emotional distraction, emotional volatility of how you feel about something, whether it is true or not. That's when people get like, a lot of first time investors will, put all their money into a certain stock or a certain share, and they like keep sweating it every day. Like, oh, is this thing going to make me more money? Is this thing going to make me more money? And then, they get freaked out when there's a bad week or a bad month, and they feel like their entire life savings is up for grabs and they're going to fucking ruin themselves. because they're watching a ticker every single day. Or we see a lot of fucking bros that thought they were the shit during the crypto boom, and started giving advice on TikTok, but then realized they didn't know fucking shit about the economy, and most of them are probably tanked out now, or have been tanked out for the last 3 or 4 months, whilst their investments went to bupkis. Although Ethereum and Bitcoin are on the way back up, so maybe they'll be back. So again, avoid the noise. So understanding this stuff, talking about why it's important, understanding how it affects us. Again, really important stuff. That second video, how the economic machine works, it's just economics 101. But that's the thing, is like this 101 stuff shouldn't have to take me into my early 30s, and most people may elude them the rest of their lives to understand. These are the things that we should be taught from in high school instead of, I don't know, Burke and Wills or whatever shitty Australian history that, doesn't really matter to us in the long run. Yeah, there are much more important, prevalent things in life that we need to understand. Australian history has no fucking impact on whether I'll be able to eat and invest and survive over the next 10 to 15 years, right? Some dude that went from fucking Adelaide to Darwin and back, or whatever the fuck he did, and then one of them died because it was too hot and they're British. That doesn't mean shit, son. Let's learn about the more important things in school. So yeah, I really do recommend you guys, bit of homework here. Watch these two videos. Understand Ray. Understand where he's coming from. He's a guy that has made his money and he wants to teach others. I love that. I vibe with that. I haven't made my money yet. I'll be making it soon, but compelled to teach others what I've learned so far on the journey. That's what being a solo entrepreneur is about. That's what being a value creator is about. Is I don't have to be 15 steps ahead of you to look back and tell you what's going on. I could be a couple of steps ahead and just be like, hey, this is how you get from step 2 to step 3, because that's where you're currently at. Right? So, Ray Dalio, Principles for the Changing World Order and How the Economic Machine Works. Just Google them. They're on YouTube. Fantastic videos. Understand how the machine is working, how it could work for you. Now, I am not, like I said, I'm not a great investor. My best investment has always been in myself and always will be. But here's what I'm doing now. It's just a bit of a closer financially. So right now, we know we're in a recession. So this year is the year of keeping your fucking head down financially. Keeping your head down financially, making sure you aren't making ridiculous purchases now. Do not buy a car. Do not go on holiday. Save that fucking cash for a rainy day, because the cost of living is jumping up. You probably already have felt that by now. I'm feeling that right now. And understand that the next 18-ish months, and we're probably about 6 months in so far, are going to be rough, are going to be tight. But this low ground, again, is part of this larger macroeconomic cycle that lasts about 8-ish years. So that means by 2026, 2025, we should be looking at a pretty healthy market by then. So what is a good thing to do? Now is a great time to save whatever cash you've got. Stop buying the petty shit. Don't put yourself in a vulnerable position financially, and start investing. Full stop. Start investing in stocks, in shares. ETFs are a nice, simple way. That's how I've started. I started investing in some ETFs at the end of last year and the start of this year, before I started focusing on the sales course, as a way to develop a passive income and generate wealth, right? There's this great point that was made by Earn Your Leisure. These guys, similar to Ian Dunlap, who I just mentioned before, Earn Your Leisure. Check those guys out on TikTok and Instagram. There are 3 African American dudes that are focused on providing wealth and investment tips to the black community, to minority communities. And so they provide a lot of infotainment, very useful stuff. Not all of it's going to be relevant to the Australian market, but there are some great gems in there on a global level, talking about which stocks to invest in, the future state of investments, just some great fundamentals as well. Like this perspective that they shared. where people will happily spend $1,500 on the latest iPhone, and that'll last them 2 to 3 years, but they won't spend $1,500 on Apple stocks, which could give them a better return on investment for the rest of their lives. Right? So don't invest in the company's product, invest in the company to actually have them make money for you. And I thought that was really fucking powerful. People like, instead of buying fucking Nike Air Jordans, buy Nike shares. Just focus less on the sneakers, focus on the company that has got a strong brand and that is continually growing and is still, very profitable, one of the best brands on the planet. It'll make more sense to spend your money there and win in the long term instead of throwing your shit away in the short term on some material bullshit. And that really hit me. That really impacted me about thinking about the way that I spend my money. Not that I'm overly materialistic, but just the fact that, yes, you should invest in the brands that you love, because if you love them, there are lots of people that love it for the same reasons, right? And also, these brands, these big organizations, they are composed of lots and lots of very smart people that are singularly focused on one outcome, which is to grow that organization. So to leverage the power of giants and their market capability and their market force, that's who you should be investing in, because they're determined to grow and they have the leverage to do so. One of Ian Dunlap's great investment 101s is 2 tech, 2 index, no stress. So what does that mean? If you want to start your investment portfolio, you start with 2 big tech stocks. You invest in 2 index funds like the S&P 500 or the ASX 200s, and no stress, because you trust that those 4 points have enough diversification to spread the risk of your investment. Plus, they're all focused on growing over the long term and delivering value to shareholders. The ASX 200 and the S&P 500 are just index funds of the market state itself. So if the economy grows, the index fund grows, you win. If part of the economy shrinks, yes, it's gonna affect you because the economy is shrinking, but your risk is diversified with the types of companies that are in the S&P 500 and the ASX 200, because only parts of the economy would be really tanking, like certain industries, whilst others just keep getting stronger. Look at tech, still powerful. Look at the 3 biggest companies in the world. Google, so Alphabet, Microsoft, Apple, all in tech. Tesla, also up there, right? So working on these 2 tech giants, my personal picks would be Amazon. Actually, it wouldn't be Amazon. It would be Microsoft and Apple. Those are my 2 big tech bets for 2 reasons, or for 2 reasons, separate reasons. Apple is the king of consumer tech, and Microsoft is the king of business tech. And why I say that is Apple dominates the consumer tech market. Since the iPod came out, have absolutely destroyed the consumer marketplace. People know how much money Apple has in the bank. People know how much the premium is on Apple and the iPhone and the iPod compared to its smartphone competitors. And they don't give a fuck, because it creates a great experience and a great product, and it meets the expectations of its end user. And by creating an integrated ecosystem that is highly secure, that protects its data privacy of its end user, it has a lot of brand equity and people invest into it. Plus, it's created this application ecosystem, so it's getting streams of revenue from many different sources. Particularly, it essentially created the mobile app industry, and through its marketplace, you have to pay 30% of your app revenue costs to Apple to be on the App Store, right? So they are making money hand over fist through a diversified range of services and capabilities. Microsoft, on a similar note, has been the king of business tech probably for the last 5 to 6 years, and really dominated that market. Ever since the creation of Outlook and dominating business email, it has expanded its capabilities quite broadly across the SaaS ecosystem, software as a service ecosystem, right? Every organization, 98% of organizations in the world use Office 365. for business email. If you've used Microsoft Teams, that's completely blown up over the last 3 years thanks to COVID. Microsoft Azure is now rivaling AWS as the leading cloud services provider. Now they also have a 49% stake in ChatGPT and OpenAI. Again, Microsoft has the business ecosystem and is rapidly expanding from there. And if I wasn't working for Cisco, I was applying for jobs at Microsoft because I understand how much of a giant they are in the business world. And through a software led ecosystem and a software led tech industry, that's what we're going through now, no one does it better than them. Most organizations, Microsoft has by the balls as far as costs for enterprise agreements and their software licensing. They are too big to step away from. They are extremely sticky. So you can guarantee that their revenues are going to come thick and fast for years to come as organizations become increasingly reliant on these software solutions to run their organizations. Right? We talked about this, I think, the other week, maybe yesterday, well, not yesterday, last week, about the stickiness of cloud products and how it's very hard to get out of. Same with AI. That's just going to get worse and worse for organizations as they just become increasingly reliant and just build around these ecosystems as well. So what does that mean? All of the world's businesses will be funneling money through Microsoft. They'll find ways to diversify their portfolio of revenue streams. They'll get bigger and more powerful. And, they're always going to win in the long term. So invest in them and use your dollar to invest in them and get many dollars back in equity over the years to come. Simple as that. There you go. Another fantastic binge thinker tangent, but a nice way to add a little bit of insight and value from the tech world from yours truly. And make sure you integrate that with the fantastic principles you're going to learn from Ray Dalio and the economic machine. And give it a listen, guys. Honestly, an hour well spent, hour and a bit, well spent sitting back, learning. It's interesting, it's engaging, and this is stuff that will serve you for the rest of your life. That's what we're interested in here at the Binge Thinker, giving you systems, processes, tools that will serve you for life. And on that note, folks, I'm going to leave it there. Again, I might be talking at a pretty good clip, but I am pretty fucking cooked. You know what to do, folks. If you like what I'm doing here, share it with a friend. Trying to get that word out. Again, by the time this comes out, I'll work on this just as I finish this episode. Sign up for the mailing list. So on my linktree/jameeljrehman. Find me. I'll put the links up on the pod and wherever you get this from the interwebs. Sign up for the mailing list. In a couple of weeks' time, I'll be announcing the lucky winner of a year's supply of the Waking Up app. So Sam Harris's meditation app, mindfulness app. I use it myself. Fantastic application, worth every penny. It's worth, I think, it's worth like $150 US. So it's not a fucking small prize that I'm giving away here, guys. It's not a throwaway. This is pretty decent stuff. All you need to do, just sign up for the mailing list. I'll get onto that mailing list soon. Once I find some space in my life and once I can start shitting normally, I'll send out some tidbits, something a bit more permanent, more insights for you to make you a better person day after day. Besides that, folks, thank you for your time and attention as always. I'm Jameeljrehman. Thank you, bingers. I'll see you next week. Ciao for now.